Welcome, dear friends, to Cardiac Radio. Here we are in a very special program. For special times, we need a special program. And we are here to think about what can we do in these critical times we're living in. It is certainly undeniable. We are at a critical moment on Earth because of the pandemic. Social issues, educational issues, political issues, economical issues. There are so many things happening, and there are so many ways in which we can join forces and go through this much more easily if we have a new understanding. And Spiritism guides our conduct. And that's why this program begins as the Spiritist conduct. And we're going to call here our moderator, our facilitator, our host, Luis Lima. Thank you so much, Luis, for the beautiful idea and for being here with us at Cardiac Radio.
Oh, thank you very much, Vanessa. Good evening, all of you following us here in this, to my understanding, a very important program. We want to bring the Spiritist view, the Spiritist heart into the issue, into the middle of the issues of the society. How do we reconcile these two things? So we're not going to do this alone. It would be an impossible task. I can't do this alone. So I'm going to call some of the best people in the Spiritist movement across the country. So why not start right now, right? Ladies first. Simone Neto from Florida.
Good evening. It's a pleasure being here tonight. It's cold though.
All right, so let's change to the other side of the country. Brian Foster, Washington.
Good evening. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for putting this program on.
Thanks for joining us. Let's go back to the East Coast. Marcelo Cabral.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you very much, Luis.
Hey, Marcelo. Thanks for joining us. And Murilo Soranzo from Illinois.
Hi, everybody. Hi. Good evening. Thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure.
Beautiful. Thank you all, guys, for joining us here. Let's put our hearts together, our Spiritist knowledge with our hearts together in this critical moment in our society with all the issues going on. And in order to use as a reference, something that we can rely on in order to live through this difficult time, especially here in the U.S., we're going to read a brief passage, which is in the book, Spiritist Conduct. It's actually out of chapter 10. The chapter name is In Political Confrontations. So open your hearts and minds, you people following us here, and let's go to it. Let's just read this chapter. It's a brief chapter real quick. In Political Confrontations, place social aspirations and Christian Spiritist ideals in clear and well-defined positions without mistaking the interests of Caesar with the duties to the Lord. Only the Spirit is eternal. Distance yourself from extreme partisanship. Those who are overcome by passion create shadows around themselves. Under no circumstance should a Spiritist podium be transformed into an instrument of disseminate political propaganda, not even when tear-jerking subtleties are presented in the name of charity. Getting off track favors the domination of evil. Fulfill the duties of citizen and voter, choosing the candidates for the elected post according to the dictates of your own conscience, but without entangling yourself in the fanatical web of the flock. Discernment is the path to righteousness. Repel yourself based on your individual conscience from political agreements that claim to defend the doctrinal principles or to attract social prestige to the doctrine in exchange for votes or solidarity to parties and candidates. Spiritism does not collude with purely earthbound interests. Do not commercialize the vote of those who share your ideals, whose minds may be influenced by your words or cooperation. Faith will never be a commodity for the human marketplace. Under no circumstance condemn those who find themselves invested in administrative responsibilities of a public interest. Instead, pray in favor of them so that they may adequately release themselves from the commitments they have incurred. In order to do good, it is necessary that the benefits of prayer counterbalance the whip of criticism. Avoid lectures and discussions of a political nature in doctrinal institutions, not forgetting that the service of the gospel is the essential task. Strictly speaking, there are no official representatives of Spiritism in any sector of human politics. And it wraps up with one of the Jesus sayings: no servant is able to serve two masters. So I thought it was a very interesting piece of information, very, very serious words when you put the whole thing in context. So I wanted to hear your opinion, each one of us. So let's just go around, see what really touched you, each one of you, in the text, or what you think is more relevant. So let's start with Brian. Brian, what was more relevant to you?
Well, when I heard what you were reading, I thought about another instance of great political upheaval in the history of the United States, because what you read is, we need to keep calm and we need to keep polite to everybody, and we can't be fanatic. And if we remember back in before the American Revolution with the Boston Massacre, John Adams was a member of the Sons of Liberty. Well, the Boston Massacre, the British soldiers killed some American citizens, right? Colonists. But he volunteered to defend them as a lawyer. And of course, he took flack from that, right? But they respected his decision. And that's what we have to do here, is respect everyone's decision and try and not stifle free speech, but be polite about it. We can disagree, but we need to be polite about it.
So respect seems to be lacking in the present moment that we are going through, right?
I think it does, and I think we can point plenty of fingers, but it's just we should not take people, shut them up, or cancel culture. I think is counterproductive. It's not good, and it doesn't serve any purpose. I mean, we're on Earth to listen to good, bad, and indifferent ideas, and to make ourselves, superior, right? To grow ourselves so we can filter out those stupid ideas. And so we need to be exposed to things that aren't right. That's what we're here for.
That's right. Marcelo, your take, please.
Very interesting. You were reading, reflecting, and almost like you have two steps here. I think the one is when you engage in political conversations, we prepare ourselves, prepare our heart. Right in the beginning, when they mention, the interest of Caesar, interest of Lord, that put it in perspective in terms of what it's the most relevant, what it's eternal. It's our spirit is eternal. All what we're talking about here, it's second. So we don't, that put in perspective the frame of our mind, because there are things more important than just what I do today, what I have, because what I like today, tomorrow I probably not gonna like. So that the friend of mind to be calm, because with that peace of mind, and then we can really use, when you mentioned before, our conscience, where we're gonna really see what's right, what makes sense, what is aligned with the nature laws that we can follow. And then We don't need to do any extreme, any side. Allows us to define what's right, what's wrong, based on nature laws. It follows the nature laws. If it's good, if it's lovable, if it's just, if it's charitable, we follow. If it's not, we step back. So those are some consideration here that when you read, that I take it easy. So prepare ourselves to engage on a political conversation, have that in perspective, what's the most important, and follow the nature laws. That's the good guidance for us to make our
right. Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll get back to you all. Simone, your first impression, please.
Well, I think, from my understanding, the key alert is about fanaticism. And nowadays, we are in a society that we are so polarized. We are not listening to each other. And that's a recipe for disaster. We need to go back, get some harmony, get some peace, and start listening to each other, or we cannot evolve. It's that simple. If I don't listen to other ideas, if I think it's an insult to listen to opposing points of view, we are never going to expand our way of thinking. And Spiritism is a science also, and it invites us to have critical thinking. We need to rationalize. We need to listen to ideas. We need to exchange respectfully. We can have conflicting points of view. That's not a problem at all, especially because we are so blessed to live in a democracy, and we take it for granted. And these we need to persevere in these ideals. So to me, fanaticism, extremism, we are so passionate about individuals and personalities when we should be passionate about values, about great work that we can do. That's what our doctrine invites us to. So the awareness against fanaticism, if we are starting to not listening, if we have ready answers for everything that comes up, we need to analyze ourselves and see where we are being radicalized, where we are being deaf to other people's experiences and points of view. That's contrary to what the doctrine teaches us. That's my point of view.
Yeah, taking from what you're saying, we don't listen, but we want to be listened to. We want them to
we
hear
love
us,
to talk
but we
and
don't want to
scream
hear them.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, your thoughts, Murillo, please.
Yeah, Luis. So for me, I think this text and this conversation that we are all partaking in now really brings me to something that I myself am personally, reflecting a lot lately. It's how to live in this world as spirits that we are, right? So how do we know that we are immortal beings, and yet we are called to reincarnate on Earth to learn from what the matter has to teach us, from having this earthly experience that we know we cannot progress without it. So we are, it's this constant push and pull of how am I, this immortal being, and yet, as the text tells me, right, that I have to fulfill my duties as citizen and vote, right? I have to engage. I cannot just, it's great. I really connected with the idea that the spirit is eternal. Yes, it is. And yet I cannot just simply say these things don't matter, right? So, what's going on and, rampant, racism and rampant disagreement, like these things don't matter. Like they do, because we are here to live in this society. We are called to live in this society. So I confess I have a lot of struggles with that still. How do I, and this book is amazing for giving us that, a little bit of that conduct of how we conduct ourselves, and this chapter was great. So for me, again, not to sound repetitive, but it's this constant push and pull. How are we mortal beings in an earthly existence? And I think this is a great it's a great call for us right now to really live that theory, put it into practice.
Yeah, one thing I picked from the text in general, and other literature, Spiritist literature as well, is you can vote as a plain citizen, or you can vote as an immortal spirit. The outcome not necessarily is the same when you do one or another.
Yeah.
So, of course, it's a lot more difficult to vote as an immortal spirit, but that would be the right thing to do then. You want to add something, Vanessa, or? I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I understand what Murilo is saying, because somehow we imagine that being spiritual, we cannot get involved, when it's exactly the opposite. God cannot do for us what he cannot do through us. Right. So we need to be creative beings. We are co-creators in this beautiful work of art that God created. Our participation is not only necessary, it's a must. So, of course, that's when we exercise our critical thinking, where we have to put love first, because nothing is more worth than being gentle to each other, being respectful for each other, but not positioning ourselves brings consequences, because we are not being co-creators. And I understand what Murilo is saying. Somehow we have some kind of belief that being spiritual means we have to speak very softly, and we can't create any waves, and we cannot put our positions. And it's not about format. It's about intention. What do we want to see in this world? What do we want to see for our children? Do we want a world more just? Do we want the end of racism? Do we want the end of inequalities? Yes, we do. We are spiritists. Yes, we do. But we are incarnated right now, and we have an obligation to help in this great regeneration period. If not, then what's the point of reincarnating anyway? Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Luis,
Vanessa, you want to say something?
I want to say something about what Simone just said and emphasize it. So important, critical thinking. And if it ties into what Andre Luis says here, discernment is the path to righteousness. And Spiritism is fantastic because it brings to us this awareness that we need to fulfill the duties as a citizen. And many people tell me, oh, I don't know, I don't want to get in. No, you have to get involved. There's no neutral position. And in Lewis' books, he talks about we either are into the constructive mental currents or the destructive ones. There is no like, I'm not going to get involved. You will get involved, and not being active in doing the good is a way to be connected to the destructive part of it. So right now, what I see most important is, I agree, we need to be tolerant, of course. Tolerance is the basis of order, but there is a critical point here that we're experiencing, like we've never experienced it before in the US in this dimension. Extremism. Right. We're seeing something that is very worrisome. Very worrisome. It's about social responsibility. What do we do when facing this? It's beyond politics.
Yeah.
We're talking about rights.
I think if you look...
Brian, go ahead, please.
I would just say, one of the most books to really understand what your duties of a citizen are, and actually almost you can get a lot of the political philosophy out of it, is Emmanuel's On the Way to the Light, telling us the whole history of the earth and how they supported Western civilization to help people, to make people more, respected and equal, and to help the downtrodden. And he also did in that book talk about the bad side of communism and fascism, all the isms, right? Of the fanaticism. And, and that is something I think the earth has to go through for them to see the downside, the dark side of that being fanatical about something.
Right.
And
yeah.
I do think people have this tendency, because I do believe, in the book Memoirs of the Suicide, Camilo Branco said that the spirit world was like maternal socialism. And it's a wonderful place, the spirit world. And I think people come here and they see this government taking care of everything. And yet we have to remember, as Marcelo and Marisa said, we're immortal souls. And when we're in the spirit world, the people in charge are wonderful and they're more perfect than we are. But here on earth, we'll never have good government until we become a higher planet, because everyone has a tendency to be corrupted by whatever. So we just have to understand there's never going to be a perfect solution. We just have to find what we think is the best at that point in time.
Marcelo, you were going to say something.
No, just reflecting here. In some way, it's expected, taking consideration the level of spirits that are on earth. We all learning. So, and those challenges that we go through here, it's extremely important for our development. As you see in the question 115, that God imposed the trials to us, so we can, from there, learning. We can learn when you do right and also when we do wrong. Yeah. But what matters for us to learning, because the Spirit says there's two ways to go through those circumstances. Or we humbly go through them, or if you complain. If you keep complaining, get this extremities, and then we can get in several other words here that represent the complaining, we're going to go through all these difficulties and we're not going to learn.
Right.
But if we humbly really understand, really as we try to understand where the other comes from, look at what makes, in our case here, what's aligned with the nature laws. And then from that point, we continue moving and find a solution that will fix the solution. When our Simone said, when you get to the extreme, that's where, even though if we have the right idea, we can derail. Yep. And then that created this misunderstanding, and then the ego gets involved, and then nobody listens to anybody, and that created the chaos that we're in somehow today.
Two phrases strike me today as I read this thing. One is the one Murilo and Vanessa already commented on: discernment is the path to righteousness. But the second one is it's unbelievable. Like, if it feels like it was written today. Getting off track favors the domination of evil. Meaning, if there's evil, something went off track. So we are not following the right path. We are not following, the right moral standards, and the results weren't so good. We went off track, and evil showed up. Yes, Simone, you were going to say something.
Oh, I was going to say something that Marcelo said. The Spiritist doctrine teaches us, and it's a source of wisdom if we want to, right? And it says conviction cannot be imposed. It's in the law of liberty. We all have free will. We are all entitled to freedom of conscience, and conviction cannot be imposed. So if we know that and we understand that, when we talk to each other, is in order to expand, not to impose, because cannot be imposed.
Very
Even
good.
even worse, fanatics. Fanatics do not get convinced at all. You can use all
No.
logic, right?
Yeah.
Fanaticism is only resolved by conversion, not convincing. So
Mhm.
they have to go through the experience for them to realize that their thinking is radical. Um, so the doctrine teaches us, therefore, that we need to respect each other's way of thinking, and teaches us also in question 642 that we are responsible for all the bad stuff that comes from not doing the right thing. So when
Mhm.
I don't vote, when I don't um, uh, assume my citizenship in society, um, I'm also responsible for all the bad stuff that comes about. So we need to be aware of that too, right? As spiritists, as citizens, as Christians, as whatever we want to qualify ourselves as, but especially as human beings, right? We are here to help one another. If we don't, we are all gonna fail together. So either we are gonna win together or we are gonna fail together. The same thing for the environment, the same thing for all the questions that right now are being slapped on our face to see if we wake up, right? As long as we don't understand that we are all interconnected, that we are all dependent on each other, love cannot prevail. If we are competing instead of cooperating, we are not going to prevail.
Very
So
good.
must that we are aware of our responsibilities as a citizen, as a human being, as a person.
Yeah, it looks like we are walking towards or approaching a point of social implosion or moral implosion. And when you get close to things like this, it's the time. It's going to happen at one point. It's a time where each one of us stop and just retreat, and we talk to ourselves, and something more or less like this is going to come up. I can't take this anymore. I just don't want to be this way anymore. I can't take this anymore. I got to change. I need my philosophy of life is not working. I need a new philosophy of life. Well, when you take the Spirits book, if you read the very first line above the title, the Spirits book, there's a line in there, and in any language, any translation, and it says spiritual philosophy. Spiritualist philosophy. It's in there. That is a philosophy. That's a way of life, a new philosophy that's gonna uh, explain to us why we should do things differently, why we should not commit to vices and all of this tremendous amount of aggression and violence that we see. So it brings new hope. It brings new light. So I think that's, there's going to be a point where all of us, not necessarily everybody's going to become spiritists from today to next week, but we are all going to, not us spiritists, but in general, people are going to look for a new way of life, looking for a new philosophy. And I think Spiritism is probably the greatest one, because there is one thing that Spiritist does and the others do, any other philosophy doesn't do. If you're looking for answers, right? In any other philosophy, your answers are going to be at the material level, at the physical plan. What happens here in this one lifetime, and that's it. Spiritism brings something else. It answers the question because it goes up to layer 2 to get information from the spirits, which is our life is not only material, it's also spiritual. So things like, for example, the aggressions that we see out there will be explained in a way that is not convincing. Why are we so aggressive? Why are we doing this? But when you understand the presence of evil from the other side, and obsession and all of those processes, it becomes a lot clearer why it's happening, because it's not only us, it's us, and each one of us brings a lot of spirits associated with us. One is our guardian angel, but we have others. They're not necessarily good spirits, and you put millions and billions of people together, there's a lot of clash. So, and I think Spiritism explains in very deep details all of that to us. So
now, I think that's a great point, and I just like to say is that Spiritism also teaches us kind of the look at our life from the 10,000-foot level, right?
That's very good.
And we should look at everyone else's life from the 10,000-foot level too. When people do these kind of destructive things, we should say to ourselves, well, that's part of an immature spirit. In some point in time, they will be a wonderful person. May not be this life, but we need to look at that too, and to look at that from that higher level of not just one life, but an arc of lives.
And let's talk about a little bit of collective obsession, right? Since Luis, you mentioned about, obsession, spiritual obsession. Since we're talking about it here, it's important that we perceive the signs, because Kardec talked about chapter 23 of the Medium's book, obsession and the signs. And there is what we call collective obsession. In the Spiritist magazine at his time, he mentioned about cases after cases after cases. So when we in sociology and social psychology, we study this emotional contagion that has happened a week ago on January 6th in the United States. What does characterize it? We know that it's beyond what the eyes are seeing. We're talking about something that is led also by, influenced by the spiritual realm. So we're talking about collective obsession. Whenever we're under negative influence that is persistent as we're seeing, we're not alone. So it's important that we all pay attention to the signs as well, right?
Yeah. Murilo, you're ready to say something, I think.
Reading my mind.
Just listen. I love the things here.
Again, it's this. I think what's going on through my mind right now is that it's hard being a spiritist. It's hard, being aware of all these things. That the truth of immortal life, the truth of reincarnation, all these things that we know are what governs the universe, the natural laws that have been already cited here. Because again, I think it's no mistake that André Luis chose to the very first thing, right? He usually leave the very first important thing to be said in the very first paragraph, which is only the spirit is eternal, right? So going back to that idea that in the end, that's all that survives. And I think the other part too of the text that is coming to mind now is that towards the end when he talks about for us to pray for those who are in power, even if we may not necessarily be that active citizen or be in that position of public service, to pray for that. And to me, that connected to the idea of charity, because if we know that prayer is something that we can always do. Right. And I know that, for the last few years now, folks, especially here in the US, I hear a lot from, folks who live here in the US say, like thoughts and prayer, right? In a cynical way. Oh, thoughts and prayer, like another shooting happened, thoughts and prayer, another thing happened. But we know the power that prayer has. And we do know that it's not just thoughts and prayer. It does have a physical manifestation, and it is important. So I think going back to that is, charity, prayer is a form of charity, and we can never lose sight of being charity. As Kardec told us, there's no salvation outside of charity. It's not outside of this political party, of this movement, or it is outside of charity. We have to be charitable with one another. We have to be compassionate. We have to be, and again, the word charity in English maybe doesn't, encompass all that it does in Portuguese, but it really means compassion, kindness, love, which is really what, it's what Jesus taught us.
And collective prayer it's so much more powerful if when we all get together, put our hearts together, it's so much more powerful. And this is something we should be doing on a regular basis. We can do this in our centers, in our groups, in our study groups. It really does help, and it feels good. It feels absolutely good when you just something like that.
And these kind of forums and discussions are essential because, like Vanessa was talking about and alerting us about collective
Yeah.
obsession, right? It's almost like a whole society is blind. Um, Social media is neutral. It's what we do with it that's going to give quality to it. So if we have and we see in our eyes that there is a collective obsession, we need to double up our collective effort in prayer and meditation for this whole planet. I truly believe that what happened last week wasn't worst because there are many of us praying, meditating, and doing all these counter measures for this collective thing. Now, in the material plane, we also need to have a good discussion about what we can do legally, right? Our laws and the way we are going to deal with each other if social media is going to be used to spread hate. What do we want? So it's censorship, is it? Is it censorship or is it because now we have these powerful tools that people can use for awful things. So maybe what took years for fascism and the Nazis to organize themselves, right, in the last century, in the 40s, in the last century. Now it's a question of a couple of years or 5, 10 years, and you have a bunch of us being literally brainwashed. So, what is our social responsibility? What do we want for us as society? So, it's always this fine line between the individual and the social, right? Where we have our responsibility and where do we connect with one another. And this dance needs to be discussed. We need to be open to more forums and we need to pray collectively as well.
Well,
Yeah,
I'd
I
like
agree
to
with
add to
what you're
that
saying.
too. Is first of all, I'm against censorship. I hear what you're saying about ideas flowing through, but I think people need to be exposed to ideas and they need to filter those ideas and know that those ideas are wrong. And if we have censorship and then those ideas come up, people think, oh, they're new ideas. It's like Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia had no problems between Bosnia and Serbia, the Muslims and the Christian. But then when the communism was stopped and they had free speech for a while, all these people wanted to kill each other. And if they were exposed to bad ideas, they might have rationally said, no, being a different religion isn't bad, or being a Croat or a Serb isn't bad. So I really think what we need to do when we go on social media is say, listen to these other people. You may disagree with them. Listen. I mean, when people cancel whole platforms and apps, I think that is counterproductive, and I'm against that. You may not agree with what they say, but I am against that.
Well, I was talking about more like the government side. Social media is private, right? So each company is going to know what's best for them. Like if you have a bunch of hate speech, I don't want to go to your platform. And that's my decision as a consumer. That's not censorship. Censorship would be from the government and from the laws. And in the legal point of view, I am limited all the time with hate speech, for instance. I am a real estate broker. I cannot use language that is racist or anything, or I'll lose my license. We
No,
can do whatever we want, but there are consequences. So
right.
it's not
But even that,
censorship
I've
in
read
this
about
sense
what
that
the
I'm talking about. I'm against censorship too.
yeah,
I'm just,
I would protest that against the real estate foundation. I've read about that, and I think that's totally wrong. And they have no business doing that. The United States was built on freedom and the freedom of speech. And there's so many corporations are abandoning that idea. I think it's horrible. I think it's short-sighted. I think in the long run, it's going to come back and bite everyone.
Yeah, that's a good discussion to have. That's a perfect example where we should talk more and throw more ideas and discuss these values, right? Yeah.
Marcelo.
I will ask to all of us, if Jesus were here, how would he act under the circumstance that we in? I'm asking this question myself too, because we've been talking on several pieces, but how would he, because he went through too a very difficult time, not that much different probably that we're going through. What did he do in order to teach us?
Well, I mean, you can use the story of when he said, "He who has not sinned, cast the first stone."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We have the source, right? We have the gospel according to Spiritism, which is fantastic. It's our guide, right? It's all the answers for our ethical dilemmas are there. We just are not looking in the right, and we're not using the resources that we already have. It's taking us 2,000 years, and it's frustrating how current all that the gospel according to Spiritism talks about. So it's almost like frustrating on how slow progress takes place, right? It takes so long, and we go forward and then we go backwards, which Spiritism explains. But our awareness, it comes to a point where we need to have some urgency in the awareness of our evolution, of our progress, and of our role as humanity. There needs to be some kind of urgency for us to help one another and to finally be able to listen and to understand the roadmap that has been given to us 2,000 years ago, right? And it's still the understanding how many people are calling themselves Christians, and they are acting exactly the opposite as any message in the gospel is. The same goes for Spiritists, right? So we need to be aware and do a self-analysis. Where are we going wrong? Because we are going wrong, right? We are being putting time out for 1 year to reflect over these things and understanding where are we going wrong.
And do you think that we've had, I mean, I believe, but I like to hear everyone's opinion, is I think we've had this pandemic to kind of force us to be in a reflective mood, right?
And to avoid worse things. And let's go back to this issue about censorship. Where is the limit where we say, no, you're crossing the limit of the general good? As Karina Liz is saying here, quoting from Nostro Lar, even the superior spirits take a stand. Yes, we're not talking about censorship. We're talking about order. And order is essential for our society to progress. People cannot speak what they like just because they like to speak nonsense and drive people into craziness. No, there is what we call social responsibility. And our government in the United States knows that they failed putting limits to how social media is working. So, of course, we are free to speak what we want to speak, but remember, there is a limit, like there is law for everything, and even social media needs to be ruled. And because there hasn't been rules enough, the censorship came about for the benefit of the general good.
See, and I disagree with that, Vanessa. I strongly disagree with that. In the United States law, the limit of free speech is you don't yell fire in a theater. Beyond that, you've got most free speech. And I think it's a short-term thinking to think that we can control people and control people's mind, and we can destroy whole companies because they won't follow our narrow rules of free speech. I think that is not what the spirit world had in mind. And if you read, On the Way to the Light, free speech was the reason for the Athenian civilization, for Western civilization.
Actually, I don't think so, because when you read André Louis' books, it's clear that when we go to more advanced societies, there's a limit to what you can do. You can say.
I don't agree with that, Vanessa. It is clear that the limit is the limit is self-imposed. It's not imposed on the outside. It depends on where you are. The limit is your own self-imposed.
I remember Divaldo Franco mentioning something that is correlated to many passages in André Louis' books, when he said that Joana de Angelis was bringing him to visit a certain location and a friend who discarnated, and she said, make sure you're silent. And he didn't understand. And that's what we talk. It's about discipline. So I see this movement.
Discipline, you're right.
Helping people discipline themselves. And I think it's very beneficial that people understand since childhood that you cannot say whatever you like, whenever you like, just because you like it. You need to think about the consequences. You need to think about your social responsibility. And that's where the limit of free speech comes.
But we're on earth to learn that discipline, not to have that imposed on us. If it's just the same way as
it's a rule like Constitution. Constitution is not imposed. It's a law. We
agree to that. And
social media needs to be regulated, and because of the lack of regulation,
and who regulates it, Vanessa? Imperfect people that want power. I disagree.
We keep trying. Our freedom stops where the freedom of our brothers starts.
Yeah.
So, and that's where we have to,
when you're using social media,
know that there are things that are not acceptable. Hate speech is not acceptable.
You need to stop. If you're using social media to drive people crazy, to create social storms, you can't use social media for now, unless you learn how to use it more wisely.
And who decides that? But who decides that, Vanessa?
And yet, it's private. It's not even public.
But I'm saying the companies that decide that, you can look at all the hypocritical things that they let in and the things that they censor. There's no continuity to this. And so I think that we're looking, I'm sorry, I think we're here to learn.
There is order. If you go to the book, chapter 2, Brian, action and reaction, André Louis wants to go into a certain place and do these things. And the mentor said, no.
Right.
Why? Because order is the basis of charity.
Right. And this person who told them that was a superior spirit who is a very nice person. Yet the people who here on earth are corrupt and they have their own ideology that they're trying to impose on others. I believe it's an entirely different set of circumstances.
Not everybody's corrupt. We
can't let's come back to Spiritism. Okay,
we are talking about the Spiritism, though, because this is about tolerance. Brian brings a very good point. How can we be tolerant with the intolerant? And that's the fine line where we have to be open to discuss, where I am willing to open hand of certain freedoms that I have in order for my brother to be respected. So, and that's the kind of conversations we need to have. How tolerant we need to be with the intolerant, because the intolerant, if they have the chance, we are never going to open our mouths again. So how do we do this as a society, as a collective being, right? And that's what we need to discuss. That's what we need to talk about it. And as Spiritists, we have all these teachings to philosophically discuss intelligently and see if we can find a door in the end of the tunnel, right?
Right. Okay. All right. So we're approaching the end of our program. So let's just
I thought we were just
reflect.
starting.
No. We're not just starting. Time flies. Time flies.
That's why.
Yeah, let's
It does.
just first of all, we all, I think all of us here, including the audience, have to be thankful for the opportunity for all of us to be able to put our resources together. Resources including each one of us willing to do this, the audience participating with us in spirit or in written form here on the site. The idea that we can collectively, even if we're a small group, but collectively we can put our hearts out and just put this out towards the society, which is good for ourselves, by the way. These peaceful moments that we can have, and we need these peaceful moments ourselves. Throughout the day, at times we need to go back to our little corner, stay there for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, come back out, go back into our routines and everything. That's an important thing. That is when we are going to receive influxes from above to continue through our days without deviating from, not getting off track. It's very clear in the text. If we go off track, evil is going to show up. If evil is showing up, we went off track. Okay, so let's just do like a vibration, if you will. Let's put our hearts together, and we're going to go around in circles. So I'm going to start just by saying that if each one of us can really understand or is willing to understand the message of the Master, we will be, of course, better people little by little, because it takes time to digest what he said. But little by little, we are going to be able to transform ourselves, to elevate our spirits to a higher realm and start seeing things differently. One example that I usually give people is this: think that you want to do a tremendous good work towards everybody on earth. You want to really be somebody out of the charts in terms of doing good stuff. If we're able to elevate ourselves physically, our spirit, if we could go into space, for example, like an astronaut, just go to the moon. Imagine you're stepping on the moon and you're looking down the earth. You don't see evil. You don't see conflict. You don't see nobody aggressive towards anybody else. You just don't see that. If you look, you're standing off the soil of the moon. If you look to your right, everything is in peace. All the planets are blinking to the other planets. They are in perfect harmony. You look to your left, same thing. You look 360 around you, everything is in perfect harmony. The problem seems to be in the small little blue planet, because we are in conflict with ourselves, and we put this conflict out towards our neighbors and everybody else. So every time I think we are going through a conflict, a personal conflict, or something doesn't please us, we can just take 5 minutes and go to the moon and just think that everything is in order and harmony. I'm the only one in this harmony, and I'm going to come back for my 5 minutes break, and I'm going to be in harmony. And if we can pass this idea of peace to everybody else, that would be, I think, a good thing for all of us. Simone, you want to pick up from here, please?
Father, we are all here, united in your name, to vibrate peace, harmony, to let our guards down, to learn to expand our minds and our hearts. And we are in this space, in this kingdom of heaven. And we look around and we see each other, not with our buddies, but we see each other as divine light that we really, truly are, all of us. And we are here, united, vibrating love, peace, and harmony, healing, a lot of healing for our planet and for us all.
Brian.
Oh Lord, help us learn self-discipline. Help us study, read about Spiritism, learn to, as Vanessa said, impose upon ourselves self-discipline so we can do the right things. We don't on purpose or let ourselves be obsessed by other spirits. We use our conscience as our filter to know the right path. And to know the right path means we have to work and study and really instill in ourselves the central tenets of Spiritism.
Marcelo.
Dear God, first I want to say thank for the opportunity to be in the situation that we're in, so we can learn, we can help each other, we can make a difference in our life, and help us to develop the discernment, develop the peace inside of us, develop the courage to move forward so we can love each other. Thank you so much, God. So be it.
Murillo.
Dear Father, give me the strength to never look at my brothers and sisters and see them as something else than myself in them. See you in them, see God in each one of them. You reflect, you are in all of us. And may I never lose sight that we're all brothers and sisters under you, our great creator, and as co-creators in this universe, that we are going through a learning journey, learning about ourselves first and foremost, and then taking that one step further and learning about each other, learning about our universe. Please never let us lose sight of that. That is what's going to bring us together. That's what's going to increase our love for one another, our love for this planet, our love for this universe, and our love for you. And so be it.
So be it.
Vanessa, can you wrap up for us, please?
Oh, dear Master Jesus, we want to thank you for being here together, for this important moment in which we talk about it, we bring it out, we feel this togetherness amongst ourselves in two realms. And we pray especially that we exercise the virtue of tolerance, knowing the importance of educating ourselves and understanding that our social responsibility requires action within ourselves and the good use of the resources you've granted us. We thank you for the concession of this hour and for the concession of everything, the resources given, so we could be here now. And we pray especially at this moment, visualizing your sacred heart radiating light of healing, especially to our nation in the United States. The United States of America, its population in two worlds. And we visualize the White House being enveloped by healing, by much therapy for the soul and the body. And as we prepare our nation for a new phase, a new beginning, we ask you for safety, protection, and especially to those who may be easy instruments, to the forces against the progress of all of us. We pray for them, that they may be deterred by the loving presence of yours in your team, and that we together courageously march towards a better day, a day of peace, a day of harmony, and a day of work towards the general good. Thank you.
Amen.
And so be it.
So be it.
Well, thank you very much, all of you, for participating. Thanks, Vanessa, of course, Kardec Radio, Simone, Brian, Marcelo, and Murilo. It was a great, great pleasure being all together here and being able to put our hearts out. And we also thank our audience. This program is going to be recorded, and it's going to be available on Kardec Radio. So just disseminate, let people know. And we need that moment. We need these moments, especially now. We all need these moments. Okay, so thank you very much for your participation, and we'll see you in the next opportunity. Thanks so much.
Thank you for that great.
Thank you. Thank you, Luis.